Hey everyone, this story is created by a human. My name is Chen. Now let's begin.
Look, I need to tell you something right now, and you need to listen closely, because this is the kind of story that gets species like mine killed if we tell it in the wrong cantina. My name is Vorkarth, and I was, the third most decorated warrior of the Kraylon Dominion. Notice how I said was? Yeah, we will get to that part. For 17,000 cycles, my people were the undisputed badasses of the galaxy, the toughest, the meanest, the absolute apex predators of known space. We came from Kralox Prime, a planet so hostile its survival itself was considered an extreme sport. Gravity 3 times standard, check. Atmosphere so thick you could practically swim through it, check. Predators that made your childhood nightmares look like fluffy pets. Double check with a side of please kill me now. We evolved in that hellscape, and we did not just survive. We thrived. We dominated. Every single Kraylon was born with natural armor plating, muscles dense enough to bend steel, and reflexes that could catch plasma bolts mid-flight. Okay, maybe not that last part, but you get the idea. We were terrifying, and we knew it. So when we finally achieved faster-than-light travel and started meeting other species, you can imagine our disappointment. The Zentari, fragile little things that needed environmental suits just to handle standard gravity. The Quellos, they communicated through bioluminescence and considered raising their voice to be an act of war. The Mephoran collective, they were literally made of gas. Gas? How do you even fight gas? It was pathetic. Honestly, we had spent millennia preparing for galactic conquest, sharpening our claws on the bones of our enemies, only to find out that the rest of the galaxy was populated by beings who probably got winded walking up a slight incline. But here is where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean completely and utterly insane. We were not content with just being the strongest. No, no, no. We had to make sure everyone knew it. We had to prove it, over and over and over again. So we did what any reasonable species of Death World warriors would do. We started the trials of supremacy. Every cycle, we would invite representatives from across the galaxy to compete in tests of strength, endurance, and combat prowess. The rules were simple. Survive our home world for 1 rotation, defeat a Kraylon warrior in single combat, or complete the gauntlet of eternal suffering. That last one was mostly just us being dramatic, but the suffering part was absolutely real. For 17,000 cycles, not a single alien species completed even one trial. Not one. The Zentari representative lasted 47 minutes on Kralox Prime before their suit failed. The Quellos contestant literally died of stress before the combat trial even began. The Havorans, well, a strong wind came through, and that was that. We became legends, the galaxy's only true Deathworlders. Children of other species were told stories about us to make them behave. Governments paid us obscene amounts of credits just to patrol trade routes because our mere presence scared pirates into retirement. We were untouchable, invincible, and absolutely insufferable about it. I personally won 43 consecutive combat trials. 43. I had a whole wing of my clan house dedicated to the weapons I took from defeated challengers. I was considered a prodigy, a living legend, the embodiment of Kraylon superiority. And then, the humans showed up. Now let me paint you a picture here. When we first received the transmission from Sol System, we were not impressed. The message was polite, almost apologetic, asking if they could send a delegation to establish diplomatic relations. The audio was accompanied by a visual of their representative, a small, soft-looking creature, with no natural armor, no claws, no fangs worth mentioning, and skin so thin you could practically see through it. I laughed so hard I cracked one of my armored plates. I am not joking. I actually injured myself laughing at how pathetic these humans looked. High Commander Zarath, who was in charge of galactic relations at the time, decided it would be hilarious to invite them to the trials. Just for entertainment value, you understand. We had not had a good laugh in several cycles, and these humans seemed like they would provide excellent comedy. They accepted immediately. No hesitation, no requests for special accommodations, just a simple, we would be honored to participate in your trials. We should have known something was wrong right then. Any species with half a survival instinct would have at least asked what the trials involved. But humans? Nope. They just said yes and asked where to show up. The human delegation arrived 3 cycles later in a ship that looked like it had been assembled by a child with access to a scrapyard. Seriously, the thing was held together with what appeared to be hope, spite, and some kind of bonding agent they called duct tape. Our engineers took one look at it and immediately began writing safety reports. But when the humans emerged, we got our first real surprise. There were 5 of them, and they were diverse. That is the only word for it. Different sizes, different colors, different everything. One was massive, easily 2 meters tall, with muscles that actually looked somewhat impressive by galactic standards. Another was tiny, barely reaching the chest of her companions. They had different skin tones ranging from pale to dark brown, different hair colors, different facial structures. The lead human introduced himself as Jackson, just Jackson. No clan designation, no honorific, no indication of rank or status, just Jackson, like he was ordering food at a cantina. "Greetings, honored Kraylon," he said with a smile that showed his flat little teeth. "We are grateful for this opportunity to prove ourselves worthy of joining the galactic community." High Commander Zarath looked down at him from his full 3-meter height and actually had to suppress a laugh. "Human Jackson, you understand that these trials have never been completed by any alien species. Your chances of survival are, to be generous, minimal." Jackson's smile got wider. "Oh, we understand completely. That is exactly why we are here. That should have been our second warning sign, but we were too confident, too sure of ourselves, too absolutely convinced of our superiority to see what was coming." The first trial was scheduled for the next rotation, environmental endurance on Kralox Prime. The rules were simple. Step outside the environmental shields and survive for 1 full planetary rotation. 26 standard hours of crushing gravity, toxic atmosphere, and wildlife that considered Kralon warriors a balanced breakfast. We expected the humans to last maybe an hour, 2 if they were lucky. We set up observation drones, prepared medical teams, and even started taking bets on how they would fail. Would it be the gravity, the atmosphere, the predators, or would they just give up and beg to be taken back to their ship? The 5 humans stood at the shield barrier, wearing what they called light environmental gear. It consisted of breathing masks, some kind of sealed suits, and boots that looked like they would fall apart if you sneezed on them. Jackson turned to his companions and said something that our translators caught perfectly. "Remember, folks, this is supposed to be the hard part. Try to look impressed." Then they stepped through the barrier, and I swear on my clan's honor, I heard one of them actually giggle. The first hour passed. Then 2. Then 5. The humans were not just surviving, they were exploring. The large one, who they called Bruno, was actually picking up rocks and examining them like he was on some kind of geological survey. The small one, Mika, was taking samples of the atmosphere and making notes on a data pad. At the 8-hour mark, a razorback stalker appeared. These things are apex predators on Krylox Prime. 4 meters of armored fury with claws that can shred durasteel. We have lost warriors to these creatures, trained, experienced warriors. The humans saw it coming and did something that made my blood run cold. They formed up in a defensive position, and then Jackson started walking toward it, alone, unarmed, except for a small blade on his belt. "This ought to be good," he said, and his companions laughed. They actually laughed while he walked toward certain death. The razorback stalker charged. Jackson waited until it was 3 meters away, then stepped aside with a speed that should have been impossible for something that looked so fragile. The creature's claws missed him by centimeters. He reached out, grabbed one of its armored plates, and used its own momentum to flip it onto its back. Then he jumped on its chest, pulled out his knife, and found the weak point in its armor with practiced precision. 1 strike. The razorback stalker went limp. Jackson stood up, wiped his blade clean, and turned to his companions. "Anyone else hungry? This thing looks like it might taste like chicken." They proceeded to butcher the razorback stalker, build a fire using local vegetation and something they called a lighter, and cook portions of the meat right there on the surface. They ate our planet's apex predator like it was a casual meal. At the 15-hour mark, a storm rolled in, Category 5, by our measurements, with winds strong enough to peel armor plating off buildings. The humans saw it coming and actually seemed excited. "Oh hell yes," Bruno said, watching the approaching wall of violence. "This is going to be fun." They spent the next 6 hours playing some kind of game in the storm, throwing objects to each other, running against the wind, and generally treating a planetary catastrophe like it was recreation time. By hour 20, High Commander Zarath was pacing in the observation room. "This is not possible. They should be dead. They should be begging for extraction. They should be, why are they dancing?" Because they were. The 5 humans had formed a circle and were actually performing some kind of rhythmic movement pattern while waiting for the trial to end. Mika was teaching the others something she called the salsa, and they were all laughing like this was the most normal thing in the galaxy. When the 26 hours finally ended and the humans returned through the barrier, they looked refreshed, energized, happy. "That was lovely," Mika said, removing her breathing mask. "Your planet reminds me of home. Well, a slightly more intense version of home, like Colorado during winter, but with more teeth." High Commander Zarath stared at her. "Your home world is similar to Kralox Prime?" Jackson shrugged. "I mean, Earth's got some pretty rough spots. We have deserts where the temperature hits 60 degrees, oceans that will crush you at depth, mountains with air so thin you can barely breathe, and we have definitely got our share of things that want to eat us. Plus, natural disasters, diseases, and each other. We are kind of used to hostile environments." I felt something then that I had never experienced before in my entire life, a cold sensation in my core that I could not quite identify. Later, I would learn that other species called it dread. But the trials were not over. Oh no, we still had the combat trial, and that was where we would show these humans what Kralon warriors were really made of. I volunteered to face Jackson personally. After all, I was the champion. 43 consecutive victories. This would be number 44, and then we could all move on with our lives. The combat arena was packed. Word had spread about the humans surviving the environmental trial, and everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Kralon warriors filled the stands, along with representatives from a dozen other species who had heard the rumors and came to witness history. Jackson entered the arena wearing simple clothing and carrying no weapons except that same small knife on his belt. I stood across from him in full combat armor, holding my clan's ancestral blade, a weapon that had tasted the blood of enemies for 3,000 cycles. The referee, an old warrior named Grexis, looked between us with concern. "Human Jackson, you are permitted to wear armor and carry weapons. This is a fight to submission or incapacitation. There is no shame in preparing properly." Jackson smiled that infuriating smile. "I appreciate the concern, but I am good. Let us get started." Grexis sighed and raised his hand. "Begin," I charged. Full speed, full strength, blade raised for a strike that would end this quickly and cleanly. I was not trying to kill him, just prove the point. Just show that humans, no matter how interesting, were not in our league. Jackson did not move. He stood perfectly still, watching me come. At the last possible second, he shifted his weight, and my blade passed through empty air where his head had been. Before I could recover, he grabbed my arm, planted his feet, and threw me. Me, a Kralon warrior, with natural armor and 3 times his mass. He threw me 6 meters across the arena. I hit the ground, rolled, and came up fast. This was embarrassing, but it was just luck, a fluke. I would not make the same mistake twice. I attacked again, this time with more caution, more technique. Strike, feint, slash, all movements drilled into me since childhood. Jackson dodged everything, his movements minimal and efficient. He was not faster than me, but he always seemed to be exactly where my blade was not. Then he started hitting back, and that is when I realized the terrible truth. He was holding back. The entire time he was holding back. His strikes were precise, targeted, and absolutely devastating. He hit pressure points I did not even know I had. Each impact sent waves of pain through my armor. He was not trying to overpower me. He was dismantling me, methodically, scientifically, like I was a problem to be solved rather than an opponent to be defeated. 3 minutes into the fight, I was on my knees, my blade on the ground, every muscle in my body screaming in pain from the strategic strikes he had delivered. Jackson stood over me, not even breathing hard. "You are a good fighter, great technique, but you have been fighting opponents who rely on strength and armor. You have never had to face someone who studied every possible weakness and trained specifically to exploit them." He offered me his hand. "Good match." I stared at that hand, that soft, weak-looking hand that had just dismantled me like I was a first cycle trainee, and I took it. He pulled me to my feet with surprising strength. The arena was absolutely silent. 43 victories ended. Just like that. High Commander Zarath stepped into the arena, his expression unreadable. "The combat trial is complete. The humans have succeeded where all others have failed." Then he turned to Jackson. "Tell me, human, what manner of death world spawned your kind?" Jackson laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, Earth's not a death world. I mean, it has some rough spots, but mostly it is pretty nice. Temperate. Lots of variety. We have beaches, forests, mountains, deserts, bit of everything really. Zarath's eyes narrowed. If Earth is not a death world, then how did we beat your trials? Jackson's smile faded, replaced by something more serious. Something that made my scales itch. Commander, you have been the galaxy's toughest species for 17,000 cycles because you evolved in the worst possible environment and had to become incredibly strong to survive. That is impressive, truly. He gestured to his companions, who had joined him in the arena. But humans, we did not evolve to survive one extreme environment. We evolved to adapt to every environment. We spread across an entire planet with wildly different climates, predators and challenges. We did not develop one solution to survival. We developed thousands, millions. Micah stepped forward. Plus, we spent the last several thousand years fighting our own kind. We did not just learn to survive nature, we learned to survive each other. Every war, every conflict, every competition made us better at the one thing that matters most in any challenge. And what is that? I asked, my voice hoarse. Bruno grinned. Problem solving. Give a human any problem, any obstacle, any challenge, and we will find a way through it, over it, under it, or straight through the middle of it. We do not give up. We adapt. We overcome. We win. High Commander Zarath was quiet for a long moment. Then he did something I had never seen him do before. He laughed. Not a mocking laugh, but a genuine, delighted laugh. The galaxy's only Deathworlders, he said, shaking his head. We thought we were the only ones. But you might be from a garden world by your standards, but you have turned yourselves into something far more dangerous than any environmental pressure could create. Jackson nodded. So, are we in? Can we join the galactic community? Oh, you are definitely in, Zarath replied. But first I have about 16,000 more questions about your species, starting with how exactly you managed to cook and eat a razorback stalker without dying from the toxins. Oh, that is easy, Jackson said cheerfully. We boiled it first. Heat breaks down most organic toxins, basic chemistry. I sat down heavily, my pride in pieces around me. 17,000 cycles of being the toughest species in the galaxy, ended by creatures who looked like they would blow away in a stiff breeze but could apparently adapt to anything. The worst part? They were not even done impressing us yet. The real revelations were still to come, and by all the stars in the void, I was not prepared for what humanity had in store for the galaxy. But that is a story for next time. So, where were we? Oh, right. The part where my entire worldview shattered like cheap glass, and I had to accept that humans were not just another soft species to be dismissed. Yeah, that part. After the trials, High Commander Zarath did something unprecedented. He invited the humans to stay on Kralox Prime as honored guests. Not observers, not diplomats. Honored guests. The kind of status we had only given to 2 other species in our entire history, and both of those had earned it by saving Kralon colonies from extinction-level threats. The humans had earned it by making us look like amateurs in our own trials. Fantastic. What happened next, though? That is where things got really interesting. And by interesting, I mean completely restructured everything we thought we knew about galactic civilization. The humans settled into the guest quarters, which we had specifically designed to be luxurious by galactic standards. Adjustable gravity, climate control, entertainment systems, the works. Within 2 days they had completely reconfigured everything. Bruno had turned his quarters into what he called a proper gym, which apparently meant filling it with heavy objects specifically designed to make exercise harder. He would lift these things repeatedly for no apparent reason other than maintaining gains, whatever that meant. Mika had converted her space into a laboratory and was running experiments on local flora and fauna. She kept asking for samples of things that would kill most species on contact, then would smile sweetly and say she wanted to see if they had medicinal applications. The other 3, whose names were Torres, Okoye, and Dimitri, had turned their shared common area into something they called a social hub, and kept inviting Kralon warriors over for something called Poker Night. I still do not fully understand that game, but I lost 3 months' salary to Torres in one evening, and I swear she was not even cheating. She was just that good at reading faces. But the real shock came when they started asking questions. Endless questions, about everything. How do your shields work? What is your faster-than-light drive based on? Tell me about your medical technology. What crops do you grow? How do you handle waste recycling? What is your educational system like? At first we thought they were just curious, trying to understand their new allies. But then they started making suggestions. Polite suggestions. Friendly suggestions. Suggestions that made our engineers want to throw themselves out of airlocks when they realized how obvious the improvements were. Dmitri, who turned out to be some kind of physicist, spent 3 hours looking at our power generation systems. 3 hours. Then he sketched out a modification on a data pad that increased efficiency by 18%. 18. Our top engineers had been trying to improve that system for decades, and this human solved it over breakfast. You were routing the plasma flow through too many conduits, he explained, like he was talking to children. Just streamline the path, add better cooling here, and boom, better output, less waste heat. Our chief engineer Kraxis stared at the design for a full minute. Then he very carefully set down his tools, walked out of the engineering bay, and I am pretty sure I heard him screaming in frustration somewhere in the distance. But that was nothing compared to what happened when they met the rest of the galactic community. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session specifically to meet the humans. Representatives from 47 species gathered on the neutral station Harmony Point, which was hilarious because there was about to be zero harmony. The humans arrived in that same terrible ship, which they had apparently named the Millennium Falcon after some kind of bird from their home world. Our pilots had spent the entire journey trying to figure out how the thing even stayed in one piece, let alone achieved faster-than-light travel. It has got character, Jackson had said when asked about it. Sure, the hyperdrive makes a weird noise, and yes, sometimes the gravity plating cuts out, and okay, the life support is technically held together with spit and prayers, but she has never let us down. The ship made a sound like a dying animal as it docked. 3 different station engineers immediately filed safety complaints. The council chamber was impressive, designed to accommodate species of all sizes and environmental needs. The Zentari floated in their low-gravity section. The Quellos occupied the dim, cool area to the east. The Mephoran collective swirled in their containment field, and the Kralon delegation, which I was part of, sat in the high-gravity, high-temperature zone that most species found uncomfortable. The humans walked in, looked around, and Okoye actually whispered to Jackson, "This is like the United Nations, but in space. Think they argue as much?" They were about to find out. Council Speaker Threnix, a Zentari with more political experience than most species had history, floated to the center of the chamber. "We are gathered to formally recognize the humans of Earth, who have achieved what was thought impossible. They have completed the Kralon trials of supremacy." There was a murmur through the chamber. Most of these species had heard rumors, but hearing it confirmed was different. "We welcome humanity to the Galactic Council," Threnix continued, "and we invite them to share their perspective on galactic cooperation and unity." Jackson stood up, just stood up, nice and casual, like he was about to order coffee instead of addressing the ruling body of known civilization. "Thank you, Council Speaker. We are honored to be here. Earth has dreamed of this moment for generations, the day we would meet our neighbors among the stars and join the larger community of intelligent life. Nice start, diplomatic, professional. We should have known it would not last. That being said," Jackson continued, and I swear I saw Zarath smile, "we have some questions, a lot of questions actually." Threnix's bioluminescent patterns flickered with what I had learned to recognize as confusion. "Questions? About the council's structure? Our laws? Oh, we read all that on the way here. Very thorough documentation, by the way. No, I mean questions about how you have been running things for the last few thousand cycles. Because, and I say this with all due respect, some of your systems are wildly inefficient." The chamber went absolutely silent. You could have heard a pin drop, in vacuum, through soundproof walls. A Quellos representative, whose name translated roughly to Shimmer of Dawn, pulsed with indignation. "Inefficient? Our systems have maintained peace and prosperity for over 12,000 cycles." Mika stood up next to Jackson, datapad in hand. "Have they though? Because we did some analysis on the way here, and we found some interesting patterns. Your resource distribution network has a 23% waste factor. Your dispute resolution system takes an average of 4 cycles to address basic trade disagreements. And your collective defense force is spread so thin that you have essentially created dead zones where piracy is just accepted as normal." She said this cheerfully, like she was commenting on the weather, not systematically dismantling 12,000 cycles of political structure. The Mephoran collective spokesperson, which spoke through a translation device in a disturbingly monotone voice, responded next. "These inefficiencies are the price of consensus. We represent 47 different species with different needs, different biologies, different cultures. Perfect efficiency is impossible. Perfect. No, Torres said, joining the conversation. But better? Absolutely. Look, we get it. Back on Earth we have got hundreds of different nations, thousands of different cultures, 7.9 billion people who can barely agree on anything. We have been doing the whole diverse groups trying to work together thing for a while now. And, Threnix asked carefully, and we learned that you need three things: clear communication, transparent systems, and the willingness to admit when something is not working and try a different approach. Torres pulled up a holographic display. For example, your resource distribution network. You are using a hub-and-spoke model, which made sense 12,000 cycles ago, but now, with modern faster-than-light technology, you could switch to a mesh network, cut waste by half, and reduce delivery times by 60%. Dimitri added another display. Your defense force problem. You are trying to patrol everything equally. That is impossible. Instead, implement a rapid response system. Keep small monitoring stations in the dead zones, and maintain quick reaction fleets that can deploy to trouble spots within hours instead of days. Bruno, who had been quiet until now, spoke up with a grin. And your dispute resolution? Mediators are great, but you need binding arbitration with clear timelines. Set a deadline, make a decision, move on. 4 cycles for a trade disagreement is insane. The council chamber erupted. Not in anger, exactly. More like chaos. Organized chaos. Representatives were arguing, pulling up data, running calculations, and I realized something terrifying. The humans were right about all of it. Council Speaker Threnix raised a manipulator for silence. It took several minutes to achieve. These are bold suggestions. They would require significant restructuring of systems that have existed for millennia. Jackson nodded. We know. Change is scary. But here is the thing. You invited us here because we did something impossible. We passed trials that no one else could pass. You want to know our secret? Please, Threnix said, and I could tell they genuinely meant it. We never stop improving. On Earth, we have got this saying, if it is not broken, do not fix it. But we ignore that saying constantly because we believe in a better version. If it is not broken, make it better anyway. We are never satisfied with good enough when better is possible. Okoye stood. Every human achievement, from fire to faster-than-light travel, came from someone looking at the current system and saying, I bet we can do this differently. Sometimes we fail. Often we fail, actually. But when we succeed, we change everything. High Commander Zrath rose from his seat, his massive frame dominating his section of the chamber. The humans speak truth. In 3 days on Kralox Prime, they identified improvements to systems our best engineers had declared optimal. The modifications work. We have already implemented 7 of their suggestions, and efficiency across multiple sectors has increased measurably. That caused another stir. The Kralon were admitting that someone else had better ideas. That was like the sun admitting it was not that bright after all. Threnix's pattern swirled thoughtfully. If we were to consider these reforms hypothetically, how would you suggest we proceed? Mika smiled. Start small. Pick one system. Implement changes. Measure results. If it works, expand. If it does not, try something else. We call it iterative improvement. And you would help us with this process? A Zentari counselor asked. Absolutely, Jackson replied. That is what allies do, right? Help each other get better. What happened next took 6 months. 6 months of the most intense political and technical collaboration the galaxy had ever seen. The humans did not just suggest changes. They worked alongside representatives from every species to implement them. They taught, they learned, they adapted their ideas to work with different biologies, different cultures, different ways of thinking. The resource distribution network overhaul reduced waste by 47%. The new defense response system cut piracy incidents by 62% in the first quarter alone. The arbitration reforms cleared a backlog of disputes that had been pending for cycles. But the real change was not in the systems, it was in the attitude. Species that had been content with good enough for thousands of cycles suddenly started asking, how can we make this better? Engineers from a dozen worlds started collaborating on projects instead of working in isolation. The whole galaxy started thinking like humans. And that scared some people. It really did. I was in a cantina on Harmony Point, 6 months after the humans joined the council, when I overheard a conversation between a Zentari merchant and a Quellos trader. It is too much change too fast, the Zentari was saying. Humans have been in the council for less than a cycle, and they have already turned everything upside down. The Quellos pulsed in agreement. They are relentless, always pushing, always questioning, never satisfied. Where does it end? I surprised myself by joining their conversation. It ends when we are better than we were, when we have solved problems instead of managing them. When the galaxy is safer, more efficient, more fair. They both looked at me in surprise. I was Kraylon. We were supposed to be the conservative ones. The traditionalists. The humans beat me in single combat, I continued. They made it look easy, and you know what I did? I asked Jackson to teach me. He spent 3 hours every day for a month showing me techniques, explaining principles, helping me understand where my training had gaps. I flexed my hand, remembering the precise strikes that had defeated me. I am a better warrior now than I was before I met them. Not because they are stronger, because they see things differently and they are willing to share that perspective. The Zentari floated uncertainly, but what if they are wrong? What if all these changes make things worse? Then we fix it, I said simply. That is what they would do. Try, fail, learn, improve. It is not complicated, it is just hard. Back on Kralox Prime, things had changed in ways I never expected. We still held the trials of supremacy, but now they were different. Other species actually competed. The Zentari developed new environmental suits based on human suggestions and completed the endurance trial. A Quelos warrior, using adaptive combat techniques learned from human martial arts, lasted 40 minutes against a Kraylon champion. No one had won yet, but the gap was closing, and we were okay with that. Better than okay. We were excited about it. High Commander Zarath, who had become personal friends with Jackson, summed it up perfectly during a ceremony honoring the first anniversary of human membership in the Council. For 17,000 cycles, we Kraylon were the galaxy's only Deathworlders. We were proud of our strength, our endurance, our superiority, and then humans arrived and showed us something we had forgotten. Being the toughest is not the same as being the best. Real strength is not just surviving, it is thriving, growing, improving, helping others do the same. He gestured to the human delegation, all 5 of whom looked mildly embarrassed by the attention. Humans are not from a death world. They are from a world that taught them to adapt to anything, and in doing so they became something far more valuable than the toughest species in the galaxy. They became teachers, innovators, friends. Jackson stood and raised a glass. To the Galactic Council. May we always challenge each other to be better. To being better, we all echoed. As the celebration continued, I found myself standing next to Mika, watching the various species interact with an ease that would have been impossible a cycle ago. Can I ask you something? I said. Of course. When you first arrived and saw how proud we were, how certain we were of our superiority, did you know you were going to change everything? Mika laughed. Honestly, we just wanted to pass your trials and make some friends. The rest kind of happened organically. That is the thing about humans. We do not set out to revolutionize things. We just cannot help ourselves. We see a problem, and we have to try to fix it. We see something that works, and we have to try to make it work better.
Is it exhausting?
Never being satisfied? She considered this. Sometimes, but it is also exhilarating. There is always another challenge, another puzzle, another opportunity to improve. Life never gets boring. I thought about my 43 victories, and how proud I had been, and how much I had learned since losing to Jackson. I think I understand now. You are not just Deathworlders, you are every-worlders. You adapt to any environment, solve any problem, overcome any obstacle. That is very poetic, Mika said with a smile. I am going to steal that, and she did. Every-worlders became the informal name for humans throughout the galaxy. It fit better than anything else we could have called them. The galaxy is different now. Better, I think. We are still figuring things out, still making mistakes, still learning, but we are doing it together, with humans pushing us to always ask, how can we make this better? As for me, I am no longer the 3rd most decorated warrior of the Kraylon Dominion. I am now the chief instructor of the Galactic Combat Academy, teaching techniques from 17 different species to students from across known space. Jackson helped me get the position. He said I had learned the most important lesson any warrior could learn. What lesson is that? I had asked. That losing is not the end. It is just the beginning of getting better. So yeah, the galaxy thought we Kraylon were the only Deathworlders. We were wrong. Humans were not Deathworlders either. Not really. They were something entirely different. Something the galaxy desperately needed. They were hope, wrapped in soft skin and bad jokes. powered by stubbornness and an absolute refusal to accept limitations. And honestly, the galaxy is better for it. Trust me, I would know. I got my ass kicked hard enough to learn the lesson. The end.
If you enjoyed watching humanity prove that adaptability beats brute strength every time, smash that like button and subscribe for more HFY stories. You are watching Sci-Fi HFY channel. Drop a comment telling us your favorite moment from this galactic showdown. Which human impressed you most? Let us know below, and remember, we are just getting started.